While researching for my last video, I had the idea to recreate this map to help imagine the scale between Legends Arceus and ZA. Wisely, I decided to forego this, as I'd already spent a fair amount of time just on the research. What I didn't expect was my video to do so well, giving me the motivation to take a crack at the map. 3 days later, I'd made this.
But I'm not done yet!
There was no point making just another 2D map of Lumiose, especially since the official one from the ZA website is so detailed. So I let ambition get a hold of me, taking us to the furthest. Turns out my ambition is actually greater than the processing power of my PC, taking over 30 minutes to render something simple like this shot. Therefore, to prevent this video from tormenting me, I'm going to keep the 3D effects to a minimum. At this point, we're 5 days into me making this video, and we haven't even got to what it's actually about. Well, like other YouTubers, I wanted to give a go at the classic trailer analysis, with a little more certainty to my predictions. So join me as I tell you the definitive position of every shot in this trailer. So I've been making this video for the past 3 weeks, then a surprise direct was announced. This didn't bother me though, because there's no way there would be another trailer so sure... Oh f***. Well, okay. I was so close to finishing the video when this direct happened, so I'm going to be tacking on these shots throughout the video. Sorry if this leads to any confusion, as we may be jumping around a bit. That said, let's get back to my sweet, naive past self. Take it away. There's no better place to start than the beginning of the game, and it turns out around 64% of the shots take place here, in what I'm going to call Vert Town, after its central plaza, which we know from X and Y, and the rooftop colour. Similarly, I will refer to each other segment the same way as it sounds better than calling them something like districts. So that means we have Vert Town, Bleu Town, Magenta Town, Rouge Town, and Jaune Town. Majority of these shots take place at what we can safely assume is the start of the game, where we exit this building and meet the starters. To be honest, from the opening shots, this is already giving me trouble. If we look in the background of the initial shot, you'll see a train station. Now from X and Y, we know that the train station is positioned in the east at the edge of Jaune Town, and presumably can still be seen in ZA. But that's not where we exit from. Looking at later shots and the design of the building, despite the rooftop not being green, this is the train station we arrive at. Which leads me to question if the old Lumiose station is still in use, since they are quite close together. Another odd thing I noticed that led to some confusion is the tower on top of our new station. On the map it is shown to be missing a pillar, although in the gameplay it's actually the opposite pillar that is missing. At first I thought these shots would take place outside the city, assuming the art and footage are correct, but we see other landmarks like this cafe within the city, therefore it's wrong. The rest of these shots show us looking down the street towards Vert Plaza. Along with our starters we meet our rival, Urbane or Tawny, who work at Hotel Z, and presumably arrives to take us to the hotel. This is where we meet AZ and have our first battle. There are a few later shots that show the rooftop of the hotel, looking out toward Prism Tower, giving us our first look at Zygarde. We can see that the entrance to Hotel Z can be accessed down this street, which is right next to our next stop, Wild Zone 1. This Wild Zone is actually quite small, only taking up the space down this street, ending before what we can assume is Sycamore's lab. Parts like this pond and the battleground, battle pitch, stadium? Are not within the Wild Zone. Our next set of shots come from the other side of Vert Town. The introductory shot of Chikorita takes place here, looking out over the river. Then Totodiles is here, as we can match the bridge. There is also a shot of Claunches, which pans over to a fur-through at the waterfront in the same park. And since we're in the river, I should mention this shot, which takes place a little further up. Next, the fight between Hippowdon and Talonflame is on the southern side of the rooftop. Then right next to it we have Vert Plaza itself, which will be Wild Zone 2. This zone can also be seen in a few other shots from the website. A final shot is of this Pyroar, and while it did take me some time, I was able to place it here on this little plateau. The trailer later confirmed this in a gameplay segment, where we see a female Pyroar next to the same statue, along with a minimap giving us pretty solid proof. Hey, it's me, Future Tone. You can tell by my cool sunglasses, the spooky red background and music, cause now we're gonna take a look at the new trailer from the direct. I'm gonna go about this the same way, so we'll break down Vert Town for now, and I'll see you at the end of each segment. First, we're going back to the park by the river. Not too hard to place, but this shot doesn't exactly line up with how I thought the park would look. The buildings and the bridge do line up though. Next, just up the road from the station is this taxi stop, where presumably we will have our first ranked or rank up battle. Following that, we're taken back to Wild Zone 2, and see a battle zone out towards Prism Tower. Lastly, in Vert Town, I believe this shot is down an alleyway just beside the entrance to Hotel Z. This is kind of a shot in the dark, but since the starters are here, I think it's a good guess. Then, this shot is just beyond the hotel on the left. Now that we are through 60% of our footage, things should go a little quicker, taking us clockwise to Bleu Town. This is actually the section of the map we see the least of, with only 2 shots. The first being down Vernal Avenue. Now, while this does seem to be on the Vert side of the street, I'm going to throw Bleu Town a bone. Next, we have the fight between Mega Charizard and Pidgeot, which from the minimap we can definitely say is on the rooftop, looking out towards Vernal Avenue over this courtyard. Luckily, in our new trailer, Bleu Town gets a bit more love. This shot is of the cafe that we can also see on the map, with the entrance to Route 5 in the background. Then, we're on Vernal Avenue, where there seems to be a Wild Zone on this roof. Before, I thought Wild Zone 1 ended just here, but this suggests it expands onto the rooftop and must have an elevator somewhere on the other side of the buildings. Next, we have this shot, which can be found here, looking at this series of buildings. Then, I believe this following shot is down here due to the size of the archway, although I'm not confident as the buildings don't seem to line up. I'm just unsure where else it could be. One street over, we have another battle zone, which is right in front of Bleu Plaza, which we also get a glimpse of. We'll start in Magenta Town with a shot that I was unable to place. Understandably, on the official map and blueprints, there are no scaffolding or construction sites, so beside one red roof, there's no real way to place it. That's when I noticed the banners. Throughout the trailer, we see these banners of different colours denoting the segment or town that the street is in. I believe for now we've only seen these banners down main streets or the outside ring, suggesting the shot is either here or down Estival Avenue. Another hard shot to place is of this Poké Center. To be honest, the only real information I have for this is that on the opposite side of the street we can see blue rooftops. Then, assuming the shot is looking towards the centre of Lumiose, the only 2 places I can reasonably guess are here and here. And since this street already has a Pokemon Center, as shown on the map and this previous minimap, I'm going to place it on this corner. Moving on to a few easier shots, we see this Pokemon Center and street, alongside the river towards Magenta Plaza. I've also placed this shot at the end of the street as I believe it is the entrance to Route 13. While there are no identifiers like rooftops or banners, we do have this building, which seems to match these 5 buildings on the outskirts of Lumiose City. This also lines up to the entrances of the routes from X and Y. Now, while plausibly it could be any one of these entrances, all but this one appear not to be flush with their adjacent buildings. As we saw at the start, the map isn't 100% accurate with all its details, but this is the best evidence I have to go off of. Next, we have the 4th most seen location of the trailer, Quasartico. There's not much to say besides this shot looking down the street towards Prism Tower, which should be about in front of Quasartico. Then there is this shot of Vinning, which looks to be on a battle pitch right outside the building, and on top of that I'm going to throw this Mega Charizard here as well, due to the colour of the rooftop. I'll skip a little ahead into our new footage of Magenta Town, as we actually get a better look at the battle pitch I just mentioned. Before, I was confused as to how a pitch could fit either side of Quasartico, but it turns out that when drawing the map, based on the blueprints, there should be a building here. However, we now know that there is no building, and it's just a battle pitch. There are then a couple more shots of Autumnal Avenue, where you can find Quasartico. Around the back of Quasartico, we then have this shot, which I placed here assuming that this is the same building on the map. Next, we have a shot at the centre of Lumiose, looking back towards Magenta Plaza. And finally, I'm unsure where this shot is, but from the red roofs and the following shot, which I was able to place here from a gameplay segment later on, I'm gonna say it's in a similar spot. Rouge Town is filled with shots that are either incredibly easy to place, like this domed shopping centre, these students in a courtyard, and these shots of Mega Charizard and Gardevoir in Rouge Plaza as identified by this tower. Or they are complete shots in the dark, like these Badoo, which after some deliberation I've placed here, and Wild Zone 4, which we'll come back to. Before that, I've gone ahead and placed this elevator around here. I'm unsure what building it's actually on, but I know it needs to face towards Rouge Town, so I'm guessing either this fancy building or the one right next to it. Next, we have this rooftop, which I've confidently placed here due to the roof entrance, tree, grass, and the building behind. Coming back to Wild Zone 4, there are a couple of Mega Evolution shots and gameplay that show this building, which, from the official map, we know is here. I'm unsure what it is, but that's a theory for another day. Since we now know these shots are on the edge of Rouge Town, in the background we can see a wild zone which lines up with this large green area, which I initially thought was a park. Although, seeing as it has similar walls to Zone 4, and the path inside is perceivably the same as our map, I think this is our Wild Zone 4, and from the looks of it, it's more so a graveyard than a park. Our final shot, I believe to be in Rouge Town, is this short one, which others have identified to be Lucas Bureau. At first I thought maybe they'd had an upgrade and moved into this building, or changed due to involvement by the international police. But seeing as the interiors are basically one for one, it must be in the same place, and therefore a little further down the street. In Rouge Town, we get to place a fair amount of these intro shots. First, this Salamence is right behind the manor. Then, these pincers are at the edge of town in a new wild zone. This Gallade fight should take place on this battle pitch. Noivern can then be seen on the rooftops between the graveyard and the school. And Gyarados is in Rouge Plaza, a little further up from where we saw Mega Charizard and Gardevoir in the last trailer. Moving on to this Tepig shot, I believe it shows them running towards the wild zone we saw earlier, as it looks as if the rooftops go from the pinkish of Rouge Town to the red of Magenta Town. Now we have this fight with a Diggersby, just up from the manor, which then takes us to the rooftops, starting just across from Quasartico with this Alakazam, where we will slowly move back towards Wild Zone 4 with these shots. Then we get another shot of Zone 4, but this time inside, allowing us to see that it is indeed a graveyard. Lastly, we have a shot of Zygarde down an alleyway. If it wasn't for the banners, I'd have no clue it was in Rouge Town, but beyond that, I'm unsure. We finally made it to the last section of Lumiose, Jaune Town. First, we are going to the south side, by the river, as that is where we'll find Wild Zone 6. This is where the battle with a Flaffy takes place, and using this minimap we can get a definitive position for the zone, and can place the gate pretty certainly here. We can also see the zone in an earlier shot across the river, backing this placement up. Moving back north, we have these Trubbish and Garbodor, which we can place from this fight with Mega Kangaskhan and its minimap. Earlier in the trailer, there is a shot of Kangaskhan Mega Evolving, which I assume would be in a similar place, so due to the background I would guess here, as the hedges seem to line up with those on the map. Lastly, we have a tough one, the Sandile. The best information I have is the yellow rooftops. One would also think that since the border here seems to be round, it would take place in Jaune Plaza. But from the map, we can't see any sand, and it looks more like there is a market going on. On top of the elevation around it, it makes it incredibly hard to place. One guess I have is here, at the end of the street. Then the other guess is in a similar position to where Kangaskhan was, hoping that the buildings are obscuring the sand. I'm going to start with this Dragalge. Despite the colour of the rooftops, I have no clue where this is. Moving on to something a little easier, we can see that classic building in the background, placing this here. Following that, we have a shot from the river looking towards Vert Town. Next, these pincers and Heracross, I'm assuming are in this small park near the centre, as we can see banners for Rouge Town, which would line up. Now, even before I've uploaded the video, I have to admit I was wrong. We finally get to see gameplay of Zone 8, which we can tell from the minimap is in Jaune Plaza, despite my earlier deduction. It turns out the map just doesn't show the sand the same way it seems to be in the game, as there is sand/dirt in the centre instead of grass. Maybe it changes at some point during the game, but that's hard to say. These two shots I'm assuming are in similar spot. We know that this second shot is here, as we can identify the building we are on, and the building surrounding it. This leads me to assume that this green building is the same as the one on the right in the previous shot, and the red building is also the same. Now, you might think this shot would be impossible to place, since we can't see a battle pitch in Jaune Town. But, using our map, I marked off a spot as some grass. However, that was only an assumption. I now believe that this is actually our battle pitch. Then, by placing it here, the buildings in the background do seem to line up. This next shot is a little awkward, but by trying to match this roof entrance, I believe it is here, which then does line up with the adjacent buildings as well. Our final shot in Jaune Town is this mysterious one, which I can only assume shows some kind of mega energy. I'm not 100% certain on the placement, but I believe we get a glimpse of Quasartico in the background, and from this angle would suggest that we are on the rooftop around here. This leads me to all the shots I was unable to place. There are obvious offenders, like this straight up just a wall, or intersection. Then there's this battle. There are enough unique things going on, a battle pitch, a grassy steep hill, and the green glow indicative of a wild zone, that there is nowhere I can think to place it without seeing a battle pitch on the map, or the rooftops. Finally, the one that bugs me the most, this Aegislash. We can clearly see a series of rooftops that go yellow, blue, flat, then blue again, but for the life of me I couldn't spot a formation of roofs like this. In this latest trailer, there are actually way more shots I was unable to place. The ones in buildings I could take a guess at, like this could be any old building, but is maybe Sycamore's lab. Then this fancier one could be in either of these buildings. This Gengar is basically impossible to place, and then the shot of Houndoom I would say is impossible, but if you know anything about where the sun would be positioned at this time of day compared to Prism Tower, I'd say you have a good shot. This cafe, I've got no clue. For these market stalls, if I was to throw out a guess, I'd say here in between the buildings, and this intersection I'd want to say at the edge of Rouge Town, but I have very little to go off of. Then we'll finish off with this cinematic shot. So if you've got any ideas where these shots might be, let me know in the comments. The plan is to leave the rest of this map for future trailers, instead of going detail by detail and matching them up with X and Y. It's just a little boring to me. However, there are a few things I wanted to discuss a little. In the west, we see a little section popping out. I've heard people say that this is maybe scaffolding at a construction site, or Torii at some sort of graveyard. But given how this area is shown to be empty on the blueprint, it can't be a construction site. Instead, due to its positioning next to Route 13, which is where Kalos' power plant is, I believe this is a substation, with pylons and transformers. Prime place for some electric types. Another popular thing to note is that throughout the map there are plenty of entrances to sewers or underground waterways on the southern side of Lumiose. However, there are none that I can see with an obvious pathed entrance. All of them seem to be only accessible by water, and therefore presumably surf. Moving back to everyone's favourite wild zone. I noticed during these sections of the trailer, the player is fighting a level 15 Flaffy, with a similarly levelled team. This feels quite low for what I assumed is a higher number wild zone. The highest number we've seen is 8, which would line up with the gyms from the mainline games. However, seeing how small these zones are, I assume we will encounter a few more. Even then, this still seems low level. This means that either the zones aren't actually explored in the order they are numbered, or more hopefully, they scale to the level of your team / progression, suggesting we can explore the majority of Lumiose from the get-go. I'd also like to mention that specifically in this shot, right before the battle, you can see an extra wild zone. I'm not sure why it disappears in the following shot, maybe due to entering the battle, but assuming that it's not a bug or a mistake, it doesn't line up with what we've seen of Zone 6. Zone 6 should end just off the minimap at the river. So, Zone 5? The final oddity I want to bring up is this. What the hell is this? Like seriously, I have no clue. They're not against the side of the buildings, so can't be scaffolding. They aren't jagged like rocks, and they're all of regular sizes, almost as tall as the buildings surrounding them, placed in the middle of a grassy courtyard. These are bizarre monoliths, but I'm sure as soon as we find out, they are just going to be something really boring. And that's the end of that. If you haven't seen my last video, I calculated the size of Lumiose, which was quite small relative to what we had in Legends Arceus. But having gone through the trailer like this, the city is plenty dense, with tons more for us to discover, which I hope to do in future trailers. While I'm disappointed I couldn't use my 3D model like I wanted, I had fun with the video, and look forward to hearing if you're able to spot anything I couldn't. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope to see you next time.